Hey, this is Trevor from Halifax, calling in to say that I support Creative Control on Patreon because I think long-form arts journalism is a crucial part of music culture, and there's simply not enough of it out there today. Vish is a master interviewer, he lands great guests, and he has his finger on the pulse of the ever-changing music landscape, both here in Canada and abroad. For all of these reasons and many more, I think you should support Creative Control on Patreon too.
To make your flexible monthly donation to Creative Control, please visit patreon.com/Creative Control today. I'm Vish's wife, and I will love him no matter what you do. And now he has me on the record saying that.
Hip Hop Evolution is a Peabody and Emmy award-winning documentary series that recently released its 4th season on Netflix. Originally on HBO, Hip Hop Evolution is an unprecedented deep dive into the cities, scenes, and figures who pioneered the various styles and strains of rap music and hip-hop culture that so pervade contemporary music, arts, and culture today. I recently connected with Shad, Hip Hop Evolution's host and one of the world's greatest MCs, and Darby Wheeler, one of the show's creators, producers, and directors, for a conversation about where this series came from, its key moments and aesthetic, why it might be a vital and necessary document for hip-hop, what's next for Hip Hop Evolution, and more. A part of the E1 Podcast Network with the support of listeners like you who subscribe to this podcast and spread the word about it, and make flexible monthly donations at patreon.com/Creative Control, plus in-kind support from Pizza Trokadero, The Bookshelf, and Planet Bean Coffee in Guelph, and Grandad's Donuts in Hamilton. This is the 527th episode of Creative Control, featuring Shad and Darby Wheeler from the groundbreaking Netflix series Hip Hop Evolution, with your host, me, Vish Khanna.
We make sure that there's order. We just follow orders. We just fill orders for more ballistics, munitions, equipment, permissions, provisions. We just design defense systems and ship them on time. Listen, my job is complying with city bylaws and minimizing innocent lives lost from my bosses, both at home and abroad. For instance, drones with a bomb can resolve conflicts, all while limiting high costs. Why not? Why not? All businesses strive to expand. Wars just provide us a chance to supply demand.
Good morning, Shad. Good morning, Darby. How are you, Shad? How are you?
I'm doing great, man. How are you?
I'm well. It's nice to speak with you, as always. Shad, you know I love you, right? I can just say that right from the get-go. Like, I love you, man.
Yeah, I love you too, Vish.
Okay, that's good.
You know I love you.
That's a nice way to start. I think that's the best way to start. Darby, I don't love you quite yet, but I'm happy to have you on the show. How's it going?
Yeah, I'm doing good. No love yet, eh? That's okay. Yeah.
I don't just toss it out willy-nilly, you know? Have we ever...
Yeah. You got to earn it, right? Yeah.
Have you and I ever really interacted? I don't know. I know of you. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I don't think so. I definitely know of you, but no, I don't think I have. I try to avoid all media opportunities, but I also know you've been around the scene and around music stuff, which I have also. So, yeah, surprised we've never crossed paths.
Yes. Well, it's nice to finally connect and have you on the show. I know that Shad is the host of Hip Hop Evolution. Darby, what is your role in Hip Hop Evolution?
Yeah, I'm director-producer of the series. Jack of all trades, as Shad knows.
Okay.
For the series.
And Shad, is that a narrow description of your role? You're the host. Do you have other responsibilities?
No. I'm the host of the show. That's it.
Okay. All right.
He's got mad knowledge, I would say, also on all types of things beyond hip hop. But yeah,
that's true. That is true.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, that's true. So let's begin at the beginning in terms of Hip Hop Evolution. I want to go to you, Darby.
Yeah.
Where did this thing come from exactly? Where did the conception of this series come from?
Yeah, so Banger Films, who some people know, they did a great Rush documentary called Beyond the Lighted Stage. Also, one that I really enjoyed was called Flight 666 about Iron Maiden. And they ended up doing, Sam Dunn and Scott McFadden ended up doing a documentary series about metal. Sam was a passionate metal fan, called Metal Evolution. And at one point, it was pretty successful. They aired in the States on VH1 and I think globally all over the different platforms and channels. And they had, they're not hip hop heads, but someone had, I think, said to them, have you guys considered doing something like this for hip hop? And so that's when they called me up. I think at the time I was directing a pilot or producing a pilot for MTV in Miami, actually. And I had previously worked on The Hour with George Stroumboulopoulos and then at Much Music Forever and CBC before that. So hip hop's always been in my, world. And so they approached me, and then I sort of just started to assemble the team. So as a concept, it was really just born out of that metal show they did. But obviously it needed some new hooks and different looks. But yeah, that's pretty much the Cole's Notes of how it all got started.
Okay, and Shad, how do you know Darby per se?
So I first met Darby through the Strombo show, actually. So he interviewed me for that show. Drove down to London with me, actually, and interviewed my dad. And so I met him through that, and I'd heard about him and heard about his work. And then him and Rodrigo Bascunan, who couldn't be on the call, unfortunately, they pulled me in for a meeting and they told me about the project, and that's how I got pulled into this. Okay, now,
we know that you have some hosting chops, Shad. You hosted Q. Did you think after that experience that you wanted to get into hosting right away? I'm curious about that.
So the timeline, is funny. So actually, when they brought me in to tell me about this project, that was maybe 2012.
Okay.
So it definitely predates Q time. Then we actually got the green light to do it sometime in 2013. So long story short, we more or less finished filming season 1 before I started at Q.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so then, but publicly we thought, they got the guy from the CBC show because he's got the chops. But Darby, what made you think Shad would be ideal as a host for this, given that he's an MC, he's a musician, not really known at that point for being an interviewer or a host? Why did you think Shad would be good for this?
Well, what's funny is one of the big things was that he was a good MC, to be honest, because if he was sort of mediocre, it would have stunk to bring him out. But then also, we also could have went the other route and got someone who was, I guess, no disrespect to Shad, I think he'd be okay with me saying this, just had more chops and experience, but he seemed like a natural to me. You've obviously been around him.
Yeah. Just
carrying a conversation, personable, nice, curious. That was always a big thing for me too. But we did have a list of people, but he always seemed to be the one that Rodrigo and I came back to always, because of, I think, just his general curiosity, not a lot of baggage, there's just, so it was easy. And then, he appreciated music. For me, that was big. I know Shad is very vast in his love of all genres. And that's cool. You can see the big picture. So I think that would be my initial answer, just that approach. And then for just for meat and potatoes reasons, we needed a Canadian to host. So that was a big part of it. Because in Canada, as you know, I'm going to give some trade secrets out. If you have a series or a film that's unscripted and you have a host who is Canadian, you can benefit from some tax credits. So
right.
And that includes a director and producer too. So everybody, if that Canadian crew's all intact, then you can benefit from that.
Right. Okay. No, that all makes sense. The other thing that I think, to follow up on what you're saying, Darby, Shad has a certain warmth of character. Before you knew what he could do as a journalist, as a broadcaster, as an interviewer, I'm sure that resonated with you. He's got a people warmth, if that makes any sense, right?
Yeah, it's pretty funny. We did this interview with him. I think I might still have the tape of it. Remember that, Shad? We filmed you up at Banger in the upstairs.
I don't even remember.
No,
no.
It's pretty funny. I saw a photo of it too. I remember everything. So but that was pretty funny. It was, but yeah, and that's sort of what we were trying to get from him. Just that natural. Yeah, I would say, back it up and thinking about part of all the interviews he did, that really came through. I always remember Curtis Blow. I always bring this one up, but he wanted to adopt Shad because he was so warm and nice, and he had sons sort of around that age, a little bit younger, but yeah. So, but it was funny. It was just that kind of, and Curtis Blow was not that easy to get and interview because he was very particular about how we were approaching, you know, his life and his life's work, and also the culture of hip hop. So he sort of made us go in this room before and do this like pre-interview with him. And that was where, you know, that warrant from Shad and just listening and, you know, letting him speak and be curious really shone through every interview. But that one always sticks out to me. But yeah, I think I'd agree with that he's, you know, got that extra warmth that, you know, allows people to sit down and tell you people enjoyed talking to him. How's that?
Yeah, no, that's fair.
Yeah.
Shad, on that note, because it's hip hop culture, because it's been co-opted by so many people, misrepresented by so many people, can you recall instances, or were there many instances, I guess is really the question, where people were, like Curtis Blow, a little wary, a little skittish to open up to you about this culture? Did you encounter that?
Yeah, I mean, I would say in a lot of cases, Vish, because, and I'll broadly separate maybe some of our interview subjects into two categories, but there's a whole category of people that never really got to reap the rewards of their hard work. And so what they have is their story, right? And what they have is their place in history. So I found that those people in particular were quite sensitive about, well, how is this going to be represented? Are you going to get the story right? And that sort of thing. And that was a great number of people. You know, unfortunately with hip hop, like that's a lot of people. A lot of people didn't get their credit. A lot of people didn't get their due. A lot of people didn't see the money that they probably should have seen. So I think that was fairly common. Darby can confirm or deny that. I think it was fairly common. One thing that put people at ease pretty quickly is how focused our show is on the music.
Yeah.
And so once they sort of understood, we don't have an agenda, and we're definitely not interested in gossip.
Right. Okay. So
and not into the beef. So yeah, I would say, to answer your question, there was a lot of people that had those concerns, and they should have those concerns. But yeah, those were some of the things that helped diffuse some of that tension. And then you know, if I can bounce some compliments back to Darby, like I think Darby, who was always there for the interviews, he knows every single thing about rap music and is very unsuspecting and low key about it. And I think that also helped put people at ease, you know, in conversation, to know that, like, he would just casually drop to someone, "Oh yeah, I saw you in concert in 1986 here." You know, they're like, "What?" And he's like, yeah. Anyways, here's a release form, you know, and and I think that also helped just people understanding that you know, this isn't coming from, I don't know what the word is, Hollywood or something. And this is people that really love this music.
Yeah, no, and that comes across in the series. Darby, on that note, can you talk a little bit about how you got into hip hop initially? I know a little bit about Shad's trajectory from our interviews over the years, but can you just explain, like Shad just says, you you would kind of floor people by saying you'd seen shows of theirs in the 80s. When did you when do you have a sense of that? When and why did you get into hip hop?
Yeah, I think 86 would be the time. I'm dating myself, but I think I was really lucky. Shad knows this story. Like, I grew up in it's a peninsula actually called Erie, Ontario, and it's directly across the lake from Cleveland, Ohio, and about 40 minutes from Detroit, in Windsor, Detroit. So there was always amazing radio. I've been obsessed with the radio, you know, and you guys luckily have both been involved in radio.
Yeah.
I'm jealous. But I've always been obsessed with it. I used to tape it all the time. There's a show in Detroit called The Electrifying Mojo, who used to play like P-Funk all the way up to, like, I think that's the first time I ever heard The Message was on there. And I used to tape it. I think I still have the tapes. And was just drawn into that world. So that's where I started to go like, oh, what is this? So I'd tape everything. I'd watch this, you know, video shows on a channel 62 out of Detroit. And then eventually made my way over to Detroit to now, according to people that I know from Detroit, with some bad record stores. I wasn't really in the scene as per se, but I was going over to like Northland Mall in like 8 Mile and getting records. That was where I started to do it. You know, it's so funny. I remember even I went to Ryerson and coming and going to Toronto. And my first year I came back from Ryerson, I was really, that Young Street Strip for a while there had a ton of record stores that played a record. And then even HMV was pretty great for a while. So, and then Sam. So I remember coming home and my dad like counting one day, I'm like, crashed out till 11, being a dumb 20-year-old. And during the summer I'm home and he's like, I go down for breakfast and he's sort of like, so how many records did you buy this year? And I'm like, and it was sort of his money, I think, at the time, and he'd really helped me out. And he's like, I think I counted something like $700, and I'm just like, well. And so he was sort of mad at me for 2 straight summers, and then I finally started to pay it back by getting a job in music journalism. But it just makes me laugh. So that's the big story is probably just that influence around where I grew up. It was definitely part of. I feel blessed too because sometimes I find, people in Toronto are a little bit East Coast centric, and people down in Detroit and even Cleveland, they were into everything like Too Short, Ghetto Boys. So I feel really blessed to be able to listen to it, have it around me.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned 8 Mile in Detroit there, and I'm thinking back on the one of the episodes about the emergence of Eminem and all that footage you have of him in battles with Proof.
Yeah.
And how are you finding these things? There are things that there are things in this series that I've never seen before, and I'm like a YouTube wormhole jumper or whatever. I'm always looking at stuff. How are you gathering this stuff? It's very fascinating.
Yeah, so that's just a really good team of visual producers and researchers. But I think on top of that, between Rodrigo, the writer, Baskin, and myself, and then we just geeked out and knew you'd go be like, oh, did this person who filmed what? I'd ask a lot during interviews too, Shad, like, hey, do you have any footage? Mm-hmm. Or we would be, just finding names, like almost like, how people like would search IMDb, but you go through and find like, who's a photographer, who's taking pictures, who's doing that. Yeah. And then just try to find them. That was always my thing. But I think it's for me doing hip hop stuff, seeing stuff in the past. I've seen, I think some of the footage we used from Scribble Jam which is a hip hop showcase that they had in Cincinnati. I don't know if they still do it or not. Shad would probably know better than me, but that was some of the footage we had at Eminem. And I always like, oh, I remember he's at Scribble Jam. So you'd say that to the visual researchers and they would just dig in, So yeah, they're great. I mean, shout out to the team there on Hip Hop Evolution. It's sort of like, you're like, hey, what about this? Can you find this? And they're like, okay. And then they would. So we really were lucked out.
It's really a marvel. Shad, I think of you as someone who consumes a lot of culture. And I wonder if you've ever seen anything like Hip Hop Evolution, because as Darby was saying, Sam Dunn, other people have really dug into metal, other genres. I know I've seen some behind the music type stuff about hip hop culture. I've certainly read lots of books and whatnot. Can you think of any precedent for what and I'm not saying this to get you to, praise yourselves here, but Shad, was this necessary? Was Hip Hop Evolution a necessary thing for the culture? Had something close to this been done?
100%. Like everything you just said, Vish, was what I thought when Darby and Rodrigo brought me in for that first meeting. Was I've read great books about the history of hip hop. I've seen metal evolution, I've seen it done for other genres, jazz, obviously. And I thought one of the first things to pop in my mind was this hasn't been done for hip hop and it needs to be.
Right.
And the second thought I had was that these two guys are going to do it really well. So yeah, absolutely. It needed to be done. It hadn't been done on film for some reason. Like you've probably read, Jeff Chang's Can't Stop, Won't Stop, and some of these other texts. Like they're great books, but we needed that film document for the culture, and we needed it soon because some of these pioneers, they're not going to be here forever.
Well, what about experientially, Shad? Did you, when you signed on for this, like you end up visiting these cities, you end up visiting these landmarks and obviously meeting with these pioneers. What is that like for you as both? The thing with you is you're a fan, you're a broadcaster, you're also an artist. And that's an interesting role to play here because you're picking up on some of this stuff is subconsciously probably seeping. I think you and I talked about this the last time you were on the show. I imagine some of this stuff is seeping into your core being as an artist, but experientially, like you got to block off time to make this show. How has that been for you?
It's been amazing. I always say we thought we'd make the first season. We had no clue that we would get to make more. So even just getting to make the first season, I'll never forget walking around in the Bronx with Cool Herc and just thinking this is totally surreal, and getting such a deep appreciation and understanding of what culture is.
Yeah.
You know, hip hop is the culture of this small community of people. It's just the records that they liked. It's just what they like to dance to. It's just how they moved. It's just, you know, it's something so granular. And I don't know, I got a deep appreciation for that. I got a deep appreciation for technology, because hip hop it starts with the DJ. So it's electronic music, and it's evolved as the technology evolved. And to get just a sort of a deep and detailed appreciation of that was really, really cool for me as an artist and just as someone that loves music. But so many surreal experiences. That one stands out for me for sure. But then to get to continue to make the show and to see some of the response from people, what it's become now is exactly what I would have hoped in the best case scenario, which is this is that document for the culture, like I thought about in that first meeting, where it's a bird's eye view. There's a lot that we miss, obviously, but like it's this bird's eye view, big picture look at how this culture began and how it's changed. And it's like people seem to really appreciate that exists.
For sure. Yeah, no, I'm with you there. Darby, Shad mentions walking around with Cool Herc. Do you have particular freak out moments in making this show? You're attending every interview? Like, I know each one, but do any in particular stand out for you where you're like, I can't believe I'm here, first of all. I can't believe I'm walking by the dungeon, you know, like in Atlanta, like, or I can't believe we've got, you know, Big Boy or whoever to be on the show. Like, do you have those moments?
Yeah, respect to going to Outkast, because that definitely was one of them. Yeah, I think for me, there's a couple. I always remember one time, you know, KRS-One. I'm not sure if you've interviewed him, but he's
I never have.
No?
And he's one of my. He's one of, like, we had. I mean, you would have had it too, but we in Canada we had Much Music, and in the early days, for some reason, they would play a lot of KRS-One videos. They would play a lot of Boogie Down Production videos. And he was interviewed quite frequently too. So in a weird way, and I think he's taken for granted because we don't really talk about him enough. I don't think, given how prevalent and prominent he was at the time, and some of his solo albums still are some of my favorite things. So, but yeah, no, sorry, continue. You spoke.
Yeah, so and it was in Los Angeles. You know, hopefully it doesn't ruin everybody's perspective when we're trying to act like we're talking to him about the Bronx. But and I worked at Much too back in the day. I can sort of tell you why he was on all the time, because he had a really great relationship with Rap City's producer. And they, you know, and obviously he warranted it. But we were about to film him, and I was downstairs, and I think Shad and everybody were upstairs. I was getting him, and he's with his wife. And I remember being like, okay, I got to tell Chris what we're doing, because if I don't, he's going to take it into, you know, his interview. He can really control an interview, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm like, listen, and I sort of knew him from my past, and I'm like, Chris, like, can you just focus on the beginning? And I kept sort of going, the beginning, and he's in the elevator with me, just laughing at me. He goes, I got you. But I'm just like, no, but like, seriously, just the beginning. And I kept sort of saying it to him, and he's like, got a big grin, sort of. And I'm like, is he going to screw this up for me? Like, I only have so much time, you know? And it's always so surreal to think that I'm like sitting there begging KRS-One to focus for us. But of all the interviews, I think if you go back and look at how he deals with stuff, I think it was very required, right? So I was trying not to be heavy-handed, but yeah, it was so surreal. I'm just sitting there like, what a weird way to direct somebody. Like, don't talk about other stuff. You have to focus on hip-hop and the beginnings, you know? So,
well,
and then
go ahead. Well, I was just going to say, to Shad's point, so many of these figures maybe haven't had their stories told, for one thing. So it's all kind of pent up, and they've been waiting probably to talk. And to be frank, they're rappers. They can be verbose.
Yes.
They want to go. They want.
KRS.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So they want to go, and I imagine that's something you have to deal with, like to keep people focused. And by the way, like the other marvel of this series for me is just the editing. I mean, I mean, as a media person, I know what it's like to interview people, and I've made a few audio documentaries. I know how exacting you have to be, and how much good stuff you can't fit in, and all that stuff.
Right.
So I see that happening. It must be there's got to be lots of stuff left on the cutting room floor, so to speak, right?
Oh my God, yeah. I mean, that's one thing. There's a treasure trove of some of these interviews we did. Shad were 3 hours, 2 to 3 hours. So yeah, and then they're in the they get chopped into whatever their segment are. But yeah, the editors were from the beginning pretty vital to the show. One guy, Steve Taylor, I worked with him in the past. Terrific. He's a real hip hop head. So that gave him a lot of advantages of how to work with the music. And then he would, we did a lot of circles. So he's patient with us, especially me, I guess is who I should say. So there's a lot of circles that happened in the process. The first season was God. It's just like, how are we going to do this? And I think we went to a place and landed at the beginning of like sort of how we presented Shad and how it, laid out. And we, at one point, tried to change it. And then we went back to sort of the original style of editing that we did. And then one of the big things that I wanted to do is bring people to feel like they were sort of there. So we had this technique called mini keys. So when you would see, say, Eric B or Rakim, you would see like we're talking about them, whether Shad's talking about them or interviewing with Rakim, and then you'd see like maybe an old picture that you didn't know. There's Rakim with a horn, in school, so there'd be a little key, so you'd feel like you're like sort of there when they're talking about stuff. So that was sort of cool. I think that was always a goal, like put people in, not so much in the time there, but just to feel like it, even the way that we spoke about it and edited it. So yeah, I mean, I got huge shout out, not just Steve. There's a team of people who really made it all work. They don't get enough props. Editors do not get enough props because I'll tell you why. They're the best thing in a project, and they're also the toughest thing for a project, because if they don't work out, look out. But when they work, it's vital. Yeah, I always try to give love to the editors when I can.
Well, this is something that I don't want to overlook generally throughout this conversation, is that the look, and beyond the fact that we've talked a lot about what you are doing and for hip hop culture and what hip hop culture means to all of us, I suppose. But Shad, aesthetically, can you speak on the look and feel of this series? It is very vital to its success, and I'm curious, and we can go back to Darby as well. I'm curious if you have filmmaking models, like filmmaking heroes, like ideas around documentary filmmaking that you're jumping off from. And Darby, can you speak to that?
Yeah, Darby would probably be better to speak to that. All I can say is that one thing I'm really happy with that Darby and the editors and everybody did is when I watch it, I just feel like it's fun. And I watch too many music docs that aren't fun, and it doesn't make sense to me because music is fun.
Well, it's very animated. I mean, even just the establishing or B-roll shots of you walking around cities or exploring. There tends to be a lot of these, and I, again, as someone who kind of knows how things work, these pre-planned shots of you supposedly saying hello to people the same way we did today, like hi. We obviously said hi before we said hi, but I see that as being a model and as sort of a template, I suppose, of where you want to go. So I'm just curious, Darby, if you can speak to that. Like, is there something you're springboarding off of in terms of people who have made this kind of work? Do you have particular heroes?
Geez. I do. I'm not quite sure that I tapped into them for this. It's doc unscripted, so I don't want to take the air out of it, but it's not brain surgery in a way. So,
well, Well,
but
there's a shot there's a few shots like
Right.
this of city landscapes. And
yeah.
they look like they're being shot by. These days, it would be like a drone shot. And I
Right,
I think those are little details. Like, I'm sorry, this is just the way I watch things now.
Yeah, no, I
I'm
appreciate
like,
it.
oh my goodness! Like, they made a point of saying, we need this shot of L.A. From the sky, and that's going to get us in. Like, I mean, lots of people do it, but to take the time to think, like, yeah, we need that. That's a little frill. That's a little perk, and I like it. Like, I mean, it gives the whole thing movement and scale, and I think that's important.
It really makes me laugh a little bit. You're just making me laugh because I was talking to the DOP the other day, Martin Hawks, who filmed the majority of the series, and he's like, "Hey, I saw that shot that was just like," and it was like me and him randomly walking like in New York, and I'm like, "Shoot that!" And then the stuff that you see in season 2, I think it's like we have this whole shot of Brooklyn, and we do these really long lenses of Brooklyn.
Yeah.
We were on a friend, the AC, one of the assistant camera persons, place in Williamsburg, on his roof, and we literally filmed for 5 minutes, and we got kicked off the roof. And that's all over. His 5 minutes of shots is all over that season. So as much as respect to him, but I think sometimes, I don't know, stuff just lands and it's editing, and we definitely had to get those shots, but the stuff that ended up in this series, like even Shad, remember the first season when Cool Herc took us on the top of the Andrew it's in the Bronx, this huge building, and we're on the top of the roof. He's like, "You want to get a good shot?" And we go up there, and you can look into Yankee Stadium. You can just get these vast shots, right? And it's just being lucky and those kind of stuff landing. So to say there was this like great, I definitely did location scouting. I knew what we needed to get, but sometimes the best stuff just landed on our laps.
Well, I mean,
but I did observe though, if I can add, like I did observe that Darby and Martin Hawks, the DOP, like they cared about every frame, which was kind of like as a naturally lazy person that I am, I thought was really admirable, because we're just shooting interview after interview, and you could go the easy route and just put everyone in front of a mixing board in a studio and just shoot it. But like they actually cared that there was like variety, that the shots looked beautiful, that there was space.
There's a challenge, right?
It's really not easy. And I now I notice it when I watch other music docs that it can be annoying. There's so many logistical things to think about that once you finally have your guest there ready for the interview, you might kind of skip over some of the details of making sure that the sound is clean, of making sure that this person is actually framed up beautifully and in a different, unique way for them. So that's like the extra effort stuff, Vish, that I think you're talking about, that really makes a difference and makes something feel like it breathes and has energy and life. It is some stuff falls into your lap, but I watched a lot of energy and effort get put into how stuff looks.
Well, I mean,
I'm go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I know you guys travel a lot. Shad, as a musician, you travel a lot. I've traveled a lot, but when I go into America, I like when I cross the border in Buffalo or wherever I am, Detroit, I feel it right away. Like I feel it's a palpable feeling for me that I'm in a different place. And what I love about this series, beyond learning about hip hop culture, is that I feel like I'm traveling with you. And like you're talking about Memphis, and then there's just a shot of you visiting the Lorraine Motel where Martin Luther King was assassinated. And I feel like I'm with you. Like I feel like I'm going on this journey with you about these cities. Shad, do you have that when you visit? Like Brooklyn, there's certain landmarks in hip hop culture, just the city, just Brooklyn. When you say Brooklyn, or you say Bed-Stuy, or you say Atlanta, like for some of us, that connotes hip hop right away. Like when I think of those cities, I think of rap culture, rap music, and hip hop culture. Do you feel that when you get there, Shad? When you go into the States, when you go into these places that have birthed hip hop, do you have a sensory sort of visceral feeling?
Yeah, that's probably my favorite part of it, is going to Oakland for a week.
Yeah.
And just being in Oakland for a week or two and feeling the difference between Oakland and Houston and New Orleans, being in Miami for a week and you're like, oh yeah, this is different. You're like, there's no way they would make hip hop like New York. If you're in Miami for a week, like there's just no way. And I love that. That was probably my favorite part of the whole thing, being in Detroit for a week and a half, and feeling the difference.
Eating all Dilla's donuts.
Oh man, yeah, that's right. You go to the Dilla's Donuts.
Oh man, yeah. I developed it was kind of, we stayed at this casino hotel, so I already had this kind of like, I don't know, fear and loathing in Las Vegas feeling to it, and then I'm like Uber Eatsing these donuts to myself, like closing the blinds. I got addicted to Uncle Herm's donuts pretty bad while I was there. But that's part of the experience too, right? Like I'm just, Anyways, man. And I don't know if we have the same regionality like that in Canada. It's not quite the same. Like it's not as extreme to me as what they have there.
Yeah, like I just moved to a different part of the country and I'm living here now, and I feel it some days, but it's also just feels kind of the same. I mean, I'm familiar with it, but yeah, there's some, I don't know, it's psychological for me on the one hand. On the other, am I right? Like you cross the border, it feels like a totally different place. Like it feels different, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you go to the different cities and it feels different. Like I had never really been in Miami, and I was like, wow, this is the opposite place of Toronto.
Now, we all come to certain eras of hip hop or certain figures, and we have certain expertise. We have certain biases. I'm curious about surprises for both of you, because I know you're teaching us, the viewer, about these cultures. I assume you're learning things. You're having your minds blown. Like you had probably notions of what things were like, and then you're talking to people who are kind of blowing you away. I don't know if we should just home in on the latest season for this question. Maybe that's the way to go, because it is, what are we, 4 seasons in right now?
Correct. Yep.
So let's go with the 4th season, the latest season, which is available now for everyone listening on Netflix. And Darby, are there surprises? Were there surprises in the 4th season in terms of things you learned, things people said they were like, oh my goodness, that's the opposite of what I thought. Did you have that?
Well, it's funny. I do. The thing that I notice every once in a while, I'll get on a wormhole of looking at how people commenting about the show online, and no one knew Pharrell wrote Rump Shaker, which to me, I'm so surprised people didn't know. I was just like, how do you not know that? I thought that was just common knowledge in musicdom. But
no, that took me back. That took me aback a little bit. Well, I forget you. Keep in mind, I mean, that's going back, 20 years?
Yeah, it's true.
Like
it's a good point.
You kind of just forget what people... And it was a production role. So, yeah, you have to forgive us.
Well, no, he wrote the rhymes.
No, that's... but
Teddy,
it was a background role, is what I'm saying.
Right, yeah, you got it. Yeah,
so all I'm saying is, give us a break. Darby, what are you doing? Come on. We can't know
Shad
everything.
Knows this. I've always... Yeah, it's true. I always take it there. For me, I think... it's funny, for the biggest surprise for me was the influence of Master P and those guys in New Orleans was big. I know like everybody thinks about Cash Money but just when we talk to people in the city about P and the hustle, and he sort of awoke a bunch of people who were maybe stuck in bounce in a genre that they knew is getting older and sort of always identified with their city, but he came in and he sort of had this, he went to Oakland and learned this business, and he comes back to New Orleans and is just like, I'm taking you and you with me. So I'm really surprised on just sort of his influence in the city. That's a big one, because I think when I was at Much, and at the time when he came out, I was a bit like, what is this stuff? I didn't get it.
Yeah.
And now I actually even appreciate what he was doing now, because we dug into Bounce and where that came from, and you're just like, oh, now I see why he sounded like that, why it's like, and why he had Soldiers, and it just all started to make sense. Yeah, I think P was a big surprise for me. The funny thing about P too, just like thinking about your question from before, and Shad talking about us being Canadians, he was the one that sort of tripped out to me on the most, and we interviewed him. He was just like, can't believe you guys are Canadian. Why are you doing this? Right? Like, it's just funny. Yeah, it would crack me up. But yeah, I think P and his influence was for season 4. That would have been one of many for me. I think I learned a lot of stuff filming that one.
You would think Master P would be more in line or appreciative of Canadians, given that he was almost a Toronto Raptor.
Yeah, he actually even filmed up here a bunch, he told me, too. He does get it, but I just think when you combine hip-hop and that, it's just like, what? What's going on here? Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's a fascinating aspect of the story, actually. I never even... the fact that you are this Canadian crew coming down to the U.S., do people there talk to you about OVO and Drake and assume like that's where this is coming from, or like?
I'll let Shad answer this one. Yeah,
I'm just curious.
Well, one thing I noticed, Vish, that was interesting was it was the first time. Well, talking about the Drake influence is like going down there and saying, "Yeah, we're from Canada. We're all based in Toronto," and people being like, "Oh, cool."
Right.
That had never happened before.
Right.
No.
So that's like definitely like a Drake thing. But
they've got to be they've got to think something's going on here. We had the Rob Ford Mayer thing. I mean, you filmed most
that
of
was big. That was big.
And you filmed most of this the current season, I assume, before the Raptors won the championship, but the Raptors are a dominant force in the NBA now. Like they must be like, wait a minute. Like that stigma is going to be, I bet the more you go down there, going to be like, oh yeah, cool, Toronto. Like that's going to be the shifting away from hokey stuff to Drake, Raptors, cool stuff. Like maybe that's just going to happen.
Yeah, and I think another part of it too is a lot of the people that we filmed, they've had some success. They've traveled the world and they're actually interested in the world.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Right.
And I think probably Donald Trump being elected has some effect on their view of Canada too, a positive view of Canada of like, oh yeah, they'd never do that,
Well, we might,
to be honest, you know what I mean? Like they're like, yeah, like this Canada is cool. We've been there. We've met the people. We've learned about the society a little bit, and we actually like a lot of things about it. And so, and then, I do think the Drake's ascent has changed things. People, like a lot of people for the first time that I talked to down there were like, oh, you're from Toronto? Cool. Like, what's going on? Tell me about it.
Right. And so to follow up on the other question, Shad, in terms of surprises in the fourth season, what kind of blew you away? The way, Darby was talking about Master P. What about you?
I think for me is probably getting a better understanding of Atlanta as a city and its history, and suddenly something clicked about how they've managed to be so successful and become basically the center of hip hop now. Like you can see, this is going back to season 3 a little bit, but Killer Mike starts that episode talking about the history of Atlanta and like just the history of Black success there and entrepreneurship. And, that's the Black Mecca really in America. And just being there on the ground and getting a feeling for how, there's a kind of positivity and optimism in that city, and suddenly something clicked and was like, oh yeah, of course they were going to take over. Like once they actually had an interest in hip hop, like it wasn't their music. They didn't care about it for a long time.
Right.
But once they did, it was on. It's like, of course, Atlanta's going to take over. There's just such an optimism there, such a spirit of like collaboration and just this history of success that I'm sure made things feel very possible for people there. So that was a cool revelation for me, just about that city and about how they've managed to be so successful in hip hop. It's kind of, I just realized like, oh yeah, that was a foregone conclusion.
Yeah, this relationship between mainstream pop and underground hip hop in all of these cities is really fascinating, because you have these characters like Babyface and L.A. Reid and Jermaine Dupri sort of going down to these places or trying to figure out what's popping there, and then what that seems to do is it brings the underground up, so that outcasts can emerge out of this. What's going on in Atlanta? Like they've got whoever TLC and these people are kind of coming up, and then that's like the entrepreneurship aspect. Darby was just talking about Master P. It's fascinating to me, and I guess I know this as someone who follows hip hop, but to see it in this series, the significance of entrepreneurship in this culture is really fascinating to me. And I think, to me, that's one of the big surprises, just how often you end up talking about business models and, mixtape culture, giving away 60,000 selling 60,000 records out of the trunk of your car.
Right.
That's fascinating, Darby. You knew this, but this stuff must be. I feel like there's an instructional aspect to this series, if you know what I mean, an educational aspect.
Yeah. I think a lot of that comes from people not getting hip hop in general, and so people who were in the industry had to think of different platforms. Obviously, LA and Babyface they moved to Atlanta and had a little bit of a structure. They were had a label support behind them, but think about even P again. Like he did 25 records in that year, like
1 year.
Insane.
Yeah.
So just to do that, I think it comes down to a lot of the bureaucracy of music and the music industry not accepting rap as a real thing, and obviously that's changed, and it was sort of they're slow to the game. So these entrepreneurs had to think differently. It's sort of what we did. We ended season 4 with DJ Drama and sort of the stuff he does with Wayne, him and Don Cannon with their mixtapes. And they were just thinking outside the box, and it was really driven by the artist being like, hey, we can do this. It wasn't always legal, but that's what hip hop was up against. They had to push, the system to shake the trees to get people to listen and be into it. You know what I mean? And then when white folks get into it, then, it takes off, unfortunately, but sort of the way it worked. And all of hip hop, if you trace back, that's sort of everybody, they're thinking, DIY always. And then eventually the system catches up to them.
Yeah, no. And that unfortunately, the racism and the
100%,
police,
it's all part of it, right?
It's frustrating. I want to ask one final question in a couple of different ways, because I want to ask about the future of the series and what's coming up next, if there is one. So I guess first of all, let's very short answer, Darby. Will there be another season of this? Do we know
That's
yet?
a good question. I don't know. We had. I actually got an email from Bangers, the guys at Bangers, saying, "Hey, we're looking into doing more," and we're down. I think Shad's probably down. I am into how we approach it. Is always we had actually written it already, so it's sort of waiting in a way. And the way we ended the series sends you obviously into the technology being a huge part of how people get the music, like we were just talking about, that thinking out of the box and how people are getting. So it's all there, but the short answer is I think we're just waiting for Netflix to go, hey, you want to do more? So so I don't really have a good definitive answer for that yet.
Okay, well that's fair. That's logistical.
Maybe we can start an online petition. I'm just kidding.
Shad, I know you probably know where the plan for the next season is going to take you. Where would you like to go? I mean, beyond what is in the works already, where would you like to explore? What cities, what figures that you haven't yet? What do you want to do? Because for me, here's a white whale for me, and I don't know why it can't happen. It seems like I always get close, but I really like the Beastie Boys. That's just an example of a big popular thing, and I'm always trying, and I can't get them. I'm sure I can tell where there are gaps where you're like, if we're going to talk about, Compton and the Chronic, we probably should want to talk to Dr. Dre, but you're not going to talk to Dr. Dre because you can't get Dr. Dre probably, right? I mean,
we got really close to him though.
Right.
It's not to butt in here, but you did 2 examples that is funny to me it's like the 2 examples in the series that I sort of go like, well, so Dre was down to do an interview, but they were doing the Defiant one.
Yes,
so
right.
So that actually, he got kiboshed, but he was going to talk to us. And then what happened when we filmed season 1 with the Beasties was it was right around when Adam Yao had died. So they were in recovery mode, and Nelson George, who was one of the producers on the first season, is really close to those guys, and he approached them and and said, this is going to be a really awesome series. They'd already interviewed Herc and stuff, and they were just like, thanks, but at this point it just wasn't in the cards, right? So those 2.
That's interesting.
That you use those examples.
I touched upon those too,
Yeah, there's other people that obviously what ended up happening to us in the series at the closer to the end is people are doing their own docs, so they were a bit like, we're doing our own thing. Like Lil Wayne's an example,
Right.
And anyways, I hijacked your question.
No.
It's so funny that you said those two.
Well,
I usually don't care, but it's just weird.
No, I like to talk to my favorite people. That's part of.
Yes.
That's why you guys are on the show. So I like to talk to people I admire, and so yeah, that's just an example for me of like someone I've always wanted to talk to. Shad.
Well, let me just jump in for a second. Darby, you were close to getting Rick Rubin too, right?
Yeah, I was literally had him booked in the morning. Yeah, there's lots of these kind of stories. I had him booked in the morning in Malibu. I was sleeping at comedian Russell Peters' house.
Oh.
And they're like neighbors. And I'm getting up and we have the crew and I get a call from Heidi, his agent or manager, and she's like, Rick can't do this morning because Kanye West wants to go in and do some more vocals. This is for Yeezus, I think.
Oh,
right?
wow.
And I'm just like, oh man. And then I tried to set it up again and it just never happened.
Oh man.
So,
what about Kanye?
Yeah, did we try to get to Kanye? Yeah, I think I did. See, Chad knows this about me. I'll do like weird ways to get to people because I know in hip hop it sometimes works that way.
Yeah,
so
totally.
It's not like calling the label. I know that you're supposed to do that, but whatever. I would try to if it's his best buddy or hilarious when I think at one point we were trying to get to Andre 3000 through his good friend as his weed dealer. Like,
oh, nice.
That's as crazy as it sometimes got.
Yeah, sure, but that's how it works.
Kanye, if you go back and it's funny. I had a meeting with Snoop Dogg's production company a couple weeks ago, and the guy who runs it, he's like, oh, we love the series and it's so great, and I'm like, yeah, if you probably go in your emails, I probably tried to email you like 10 times to get Snoop. And he's like in the first season, right?
And you got him.
And he's like, oh, yeah, we ended up getting him.
Yeah.
But it was sort of a show and prove with him, I think. So, but yeah, so we would always do weird things. Shad knows this, but
yeah.
Well, that kind of is the reason I'm asking this question to Shad. Yeah. It was originally for Shad, but
sorry about that.
No, it's not. It's fine. But my point is, yes, to your point, Darby. Like the show is so established now, and the guest list and the interview list is so impressive. You might have more luck getting the white whales, the people that you just missed, if you can revisit those stories. So. Yeah. Perhaps in keeping with that, Shad, what would you like to explore? Who would you like to speak with? Is there anyone that comes to mind?
Yeah, again, the technology thread, I think, is one that I would like to follow. The Soulja Boys and what they did on YouTube, and also, I might be wrong on this, but I think Soulja Boy was one of these first people that, like in the days of downloading, illegal downloading, your post Napster, but like LimeWire and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
He was one of the first guys that would tag a song like Nas featuring Dr. Dre and Bone Thugs and Eminem, and and then you download it and it's just him, that stuff. I think Lil B is fascinating as far as technology goes. I think, Wayne was maybe the first, but people were trying to make their Illmatic after Illmatic. They were trying to make their masterpiece. And then these guys broke the mold by kind of being like, or you could just make stuff, and
right.
And it's cool. So I think that technology thread is one I would like to follow, just because I think that's just fascinating and probably the truest sense of like how the culture evolved. But really, Vish, I trust Darby and Buns and however they want to however they want to tell the story. No, but I'm trying to think of who I would want to see in it. I just think some of those people, and now we're getting into micro eras of the internet, SoundCloud, that gave a whole generations, maybe like too generous a term, but kind of like this sort of micro generation of artists that came out of SoundCloud. I think the technology continues to kind of dictate auto-tune and the way that changed rap.
Yeah,
Big
that's,
time.
That's Darby. Is this news to you? What Shad's saying? You sound
No. What about you, Mish? What do you think? What would you like to see? I'm always curious. Not to throw it back at you, but yeah.
Well, I mean, from a Canadian perspective, I feel like there's some.
I knew you were gonna say that. That's why I asked.
Well, it's true. I think there's some potential there.
Yeah.
Obviously, you've got one of
100%.
the country's greatest MCs as your host, so you have a slight conflict of interest. But
Well, I actually take that legitimately I take that serious to me in a way. Like, how do you present that is a little bit unusual. So
I just like, from my perspective, when I was coming up and the underground hip hop that I gravitated towards in the 90s was actually mostly coming from the Maritimes.
Right.
And so it's fascinating to me that that's not a story that we really know that much about. And again, probably the appeal for it might be limited, but you have this great luxury with your series of shining a 15, 20-minute segment as part of some, I don't know what you would call it, but just underground. Perhaps that's an episode. Perhaps it's a global episode where you kind of home in on the hip-hop scene in Finland that we don't know about, or the hip-hop scene in India that we don't know about.
Wow, India is exciting, it's funny. I think globally too, it's weird. That's attractive to me because I think that at the essence of what's going on outside of North America is, and maybe outside the UK, is sort of like hip hop as an activist, as a platform. Like, it's sort of that old school flavor that it has, like in Colombia or even in China. I got a couple emails from these Chinese kids who are saying, we're really going at the system with hip hop. It's exciting, right? So,
and I think
that stuff excites me more than even technology stuff a little bit, because it's the platform, right?
Yeah, and I think there are some examples of prominent American or North American hip hop artists who realize that, who try to integrate other cultural figures or styles into their own stuff. And maybe that's now I'm just producing a segment for Hip Hop Evolution, and I
like it though. I'm curious. If I was gonna pull it apart though, hey, respect to the Maritimes, shout out to those guys, because I'm with you. I like that stuff too. I got a ton of 45s and 12 inches of that stuff down in my basement. But I think for us, sometimes it's like tough. Like, do you do that? Because if you're gonna do Canada, to me, it all sort of ends and adds up to Drake. So how do you get there, right? And that's how you try to. That's how we always approach it. It's like the peaks, and how do you get there? Someone could school me, but I'm not quite sure how the Maritimes plays into it. But that's the challenge.
That's
right?
just it. I mean, there's stuff about you've tackled the Dirty South from a couple of different angles now, throughout the series, right? So to me, there's just there's got to be some entry points into these other. Anyway, again, I don't mean to be presumptuous. You asked me, I'm telling you what I thought. That's it.
Yeah.
There's something there. I don't know what it is. I don't know if there'd be interest in it. We unfortunately, as Canadians, we sometimes who make things, we end up discovering that the stuff we make about America is going to resonate more than the stuff we make about Canada. And I find that frustrating as someone who lives here and wants to shine light on stuff. Anyway,
it's true.
That's neither here nor there. So, for those who don't know, Hip Hop Evolution is available on Netflix around the world. Where can people go to follow the show and the series? Is there a place in particular, Darby?
I would just go on Netflix, because our Twitter present is go to Shad K Music. I think at Shad K Music, he will always keep you up to date. Shad is a social media monster, as you know. So,
oh yeah, he loves it. I know.
I'm having some fun with him there.
I know he loves it. I know he loves doing all that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I would say that, and then there is Netflix is your best bet though, because it's a funny world when you're in the algorithm and then on Netflix that they basically just put the show up. There isn't any real big press except for people like you, Vish, who are reaching out, and there isn't. It's weird. It's a bit of a funny thing. I remember when the first season went on there. Shad can back me up on this. You're sort of like, oh, it's just coming out. Like, what are we doing? It's sort of in my past. I'm freaking out. And then it's on there and you're just like, whoa, that was sort of wild. People are really into this, So yeah, go to the platform. It's always going to keep you up to date, I think.
But that's that dark genius of
Yes.
Netflix, right? Like
Wow.
they don't need to promote because they're like, we know you better than you know yourself.
Yes.
And if you're going to watch
Yeah.
the show, we're going to put it in front of your face. And
Yes.
as soon as you open Netflix,
Nice.
It tells you a lot about
That's
yourself,
true.
eh? That when you do that, when you look at what's recommended for you, you're like, oh wow, I'm sort of dark.
It's true.
What's a lot of show about drugs and crime?
Before we go, Shad, anything you want to add? Any upcoming events or anything else going on with you?
Not really. I'm just working on new music for now, so I probably won't be touring until that's all done, but hopefully later this year.
Okay. So again, to follow you and learn more about the show at Shad K, is that right? Or?
Yeah. At everything, all my handles are Shad K Music.
Shad K Music. Okay. Well, Shad, Darby, this was a pleasure, and I thank you for making Hip Hop Evolution, and I thank you for your time, and I wish you the best of luck with everything. Thanks again.
Thanks.
Yeah, good luck it
Thanks,
out.
Bish. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Get it, got it, good. Get it, got it, good. They can't kill us cause they can't see us cause they only see. Get it, got it, good. They can't kill us cause they can't see us.
Very, very special thanks to Darby Wheeler for making his debut appearance on this program, and also to Shad for returning to the show for this, the 527th episode of Creative Control, which is part of the Entertainment One podcast network and is available on all iOS and Android platforms, and also on Spotify, YouTube, Audio Boom, everything. All of the platforms, it's there. If you look, it's there. Creative Control is there for you. However, if you can't find a particular episode that someone told you about and it's not on any of those things because it goes way too far back in the archives, or maybe you're just looking for more information about me or to sign up for my semi-regularly scheduled newsletter, well, all of the stuff you would need is on my slightly updated, it is actually vastly updated. It's a very updated version of my website, which you can find at vishkhanna.com. So go there for all your vishkhanna.com needs. Also, like Creative Control on Facebook, follow the show on Twitter at vishcreative, or follow me directly at vishkhanna. Also, please visit patreon.com/Creative Control to make a flexible monthly donation to keep this podcast going. And again, there is now a $6 and above tier for those of you who wish to access exclusive content from my personal archives. It really doesn't have much to do with the show at all, except that I've been doing this a long time and I have some stuff. So again, $6 or more gets you access to that stuff. Go to patreon.com/Creative Control. And if you don't even want access to this stuff, it just supports the show, which I appreciate. So thank you. Speaking of thanks again to Pizza Trokadero, The Bookshelf, Planet Bean Coffee, and Grandad's Donuts. All businesses in Ontario, Canada that support this show somehow, even though I moved to Alberta. I don't know how they're doing it. They provide in-kind support all the way across the country. It's remarkable, frankly, and I thank them for that. Also in Ontario, Jim Guthrie. Jim is my friend. He lends me music sometimes for the show. You're hearing a bit of it in the background right now, and you can hear more of it at jimguthrie.org. Finally, thank you. Thank you for listening to this episode of the show and for listening to other episodes of the show and potentially even subscribing to this podcast. It means the world, and I appreciate it. So thanks for doing all those things. I'll talk to you soon. Goodbye for now.